Sunderland won, Everton won, and probably a good point for Everton considering everything. But to discuss everything and to understand why certain things went the way they did, I'm going to be talking about the positives from the first half, because I did think there was quite a few positives, but then also the capitulation in the second half, why we couldn't get close to Sunderland, and a few other talking points, Tierno Barry being one of them, and then why Iliman Ndiaye is just the best footballer I've ever seen. So Everton started like this, and I think this is probably what much of us expected, with Tierno Barry coming in to replace Beto. Otherwise, not many changes, with Garner and Gay being in the midfield, something that we've come to expect. Obviously, Jake O'Brien and this back four starting its 6th consecutive game as a back four unit. And you know what? First half, I can't have any complaints, but let's get into why it was positive in the first half. So from the 7th minute and even before that, for quite a while, we saw this happen, and that is Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. His positioning here is very important, because not only is he pressing Don Ballard, who is clearly a press trigger for Everton in this game, making sure he didn't have any time on the ball. It was also, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall's positioning was important because it was stopping this passing lane into Granit Xhaka, meaning that Xhaka was, yes, unmarked, but there was no feasible way of passing it to him quickly. It would have to mean that Sunderland would have to play this ball here to then play back inside, by which point Jack Grealish has already pounced on the ball and prevents that passing lane from even existing. So that was very good, because we did nullify Xhaka in that first half, and that led to some good moments. One of them being this: Ballard all on his own. Xhaka, nowhere to be seen, doesn't want to drop deep because he wants to receive a pass in the middle third to then be able to play it forward into the next phase of play. But that does become impossible, and you can see here, Ballard has slowed the tempo right down because he's not sure where he's supposed to pass to. And before long, Everton did really grow into the game, having several shots, but the most important being the one that started from this position. Iliman Ndiaye has absolutely no right to go on to score from this position in a couple of seconds. And if I just magnify on Iliman Ndiaye for a second here, what you do see is that his left arm is outstretched behind him, feeling where the defender is, meaning that Iliman Ndiaye doesn't actually have to look at the defender. He can instead focus on the ball and then his next action from that. And what's important here is that Iliman Ndiaye does protect the ball, because what we can see is that James Garner is quite a distance away, has a man next to him. So is Jake O'Brien, meaning that passing right now isn't really an option. So he holds on to the ball, and then that allows James Garner to become involved. Barry, proactive movement, is already looking to drive into the space, and you can see that the Sunderland defenders here are already backpedaling because they're terrified of Barry's pace, which is a good thing because it drives all of the Sunderland defenders back towards their own goal, which should, in theory, and it did, create spaces for the likes of Iliman Ndiaye to operate in. And then after a bit of tussling from Tierno Barry, using that 6'5" frame to be a nuisance, it does mean that the ball eventually falls to Iliman Ndiaye. But how on earth does he go on to score from there? And furthermore, how does he go on to score from this position? Because not only is he on his weaker left foot cutting inside here, he's also got 3 Sunderland players on him, all of which are giants. But instead of making a move directly towards the goal, he actually makes a lateral move, which means that he's moving away from the Sunderland defenders. But it does make the shot technique quite difficult because he's now having to wrap his left foot around the ball. However, through his own quality and just technical ability, he's able to do these things. He's able to produce these magic moments with his left foot that no other player could do with their strong foot. And then the miss from Tierno Barry. Listen, this is a confidence miss for me. This is a miss that you don't necessarily miss when you've already got that first goal under your belt, because that's just a confidence thing. There's nothing quality about that. It's just you're either feeling it or you're not. And that's a problem for Barry. He needs that first goal to come. And we're going to talk about Barry in a second. But first, we need to talk about a few more things that happened in that first half. You can see here that Everton have got 3 players all on the left. But what that has done is drag out multiple Sunderland players, including Granit Xhaka, to that right-hand side of their defence. And that does create gaps in other parts of positions, as you can see through Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall's positioning here. He's in a blind spot. Nobody's really picking him up. Nobody wants to go out to him because that would disrupt the defensive line. In the top left, you can see the time. And that is the signal for the second half. And that's the signal for Everton just completely forgetting what they were doing so well in the first half, capitulating and just letting Sunderland do whatever they wanted. On the ball here is Granit Xhaka. He, in the first half, was getting marked out of the game through Keenan Dewsbury-Hall's positioning and his ability to cut up the passing lanes, meaning that Xhaka didn't really receive the ball all that much, and Sunderland's build-up play was massively disrupted. But in this instance, he's on the ball, and he's just about to enter the final third. Meanwhile, Keenan Dewsbury-Hall is quite a distance away from Xhaka, probably doesn't think it's worth going out to press him because Xhaka is in a wide area. And I can see the reasoning behind that, keep numbers in the middle to make it harder in the more dangerous positions. But the problem here is that Cai doesn't also think this, because Cai is now going to press Xhaka and then press the ball. And what that does is that it forces Keenan Dewsbury-Hall to then drop back into a defensive cover position, which means that now Everton have got several players all in their own box. Everybody is extremely deep. The other defensive midfielder, James Garner, is even here. He's not really marking anyone. He's just naturally dropped deep because the entire Everton team have also dropped deep. And now look where Xhaka is. He's completely unmarked, has a massive distance and loads of space to run into. And that does mean the ball will fall to him because he's unmarked, he's time to run onto it, and he gets a strike away, and it's then 1-1. And it was an avoidable goal that we prevented throughout the first half, but you switch off once, Xhaka will punish you. Again, here in the midfield, having enough time and space to perform outside of the boot passes to wide areas without much pressure being on him. Keenan Dewsbury-Hall is there in this situation, but it did take a bit too much time to get to him. From there, the ball gets played out wide and then gets cut back to Mukiele, who now has a perfect opportunity to cross the ball into the box. All because we didn't really put pressure on Xhaka in the initial build-up phases of this move. Now I want to talk about Tierno Barry. I don't like to be negative, but the way that he's been treated or managed doesn't sit right with me. We've seen this before with Moise Kean, a player that came in with a lot of talent, but admittedly raw ability, that needed that arm around him, needed the nurturing aspect that minutes would give you, just to improve, refine the game, and then go on to become a good player. That, well, the reason we bought these players are because we believe they're going to be good. So, and the reason we bought Barry is because we believe he's got a high ceiling, but he's never going to get to that ceiling. If anything, he's going to regress if we're not trusting him with minutes. It was quite uncomfortable viewing when he did get subbed off because Beto was already on the sideline waiting to come on, and you could see Barry's body language, his shoulders dropped, he was shaking his head, and you could clearly see he's got a negative impact on how he believes in himself as a player. And it's quite sad to see because I really want Barry to do well, but this treatment of him is not going to get him to where he wants to be. He will no doubt, if this goes on, will leave on loan, and he'll probably settle at a loan club, and we'll probably lose him on a permanent basis. And then we're back to square one, having to reinvest funds into buying another striker. But if we keep repeating these steps, we're never going to get anywhere. You have to put trust in these players. Look at Jean-Philippe Mateta at Crystal Palace, a player that was almost a laughingstock when he came into the Premier League because of the aesthetics of his play and the few of the chances he missed. But look at him now. He was given those minutes. He was given those reps up front in the Premier League from after coming from a foreign league, and you will improve, you will get used to the pace and the tempo of the game, but you just need to be trusted to do it. And with Beto there as an option, I think Moyes flinches a bit too quickly these days, especially with making subs early on that affect the team. And as well, Beto didn't really do much after coming on. We might as well have given Barry those minutes just to get the minutes in his legs and to hopefully refine his game a bit more. And now for the reason that Everton couldn't get out of defence when trying to play out from the back. James Tarkowski's got the ball here, and there's not really many options. Dwight McNeil has stepped into a central or half space position to receive a ball straight into his feet, but from there, nothing really comes from it, with McNeil playing a sideways pass to O'Brien. O'Brien, it wants to play this pass forward. You can even see him pointing. He wants him to be there. That's where Iliman Ndiaye was in the first half. But without that option, it means that O'Brien can only realistically play this pass, which has now become telegraphed. So the Sunderland winger steps inside just to block off that pass, meaning that Dwight McNeil, when he gets the ball, is now pressured to play a pass when inside. And from our own build-up, it results in a Sunderland throw-in. You can see here the The ref, no doubt about it, the ref, it's a throw in. And it was an unforced error. We clearly just don't really have the patterns there when we're trying to play. When teams don't really pressure us and they sit in that mid block, they just let us have it because they know we don't really have an idea of how we're going to hurt them. And then, obviously, the recurring theme of the second half is Xhaka absolutely running the show. Look at him here. He's got his head down. He's looking at the ball. He's not even scanning for options because he knows he's got so much time, so much space to make a decision of where he wants to play the ball that it doesn't really matter where he looks at this point. He's just focused on controlling the ball. And when he does play it forward, he plays one pass and goes from his own half all the way to Enzo Lefebvre, who's now in Everton's final third. And from that, Reinildo gets the ball, crosses it in, and it's a dangerous goal-scoring chance. All because we just sat off. Kind of have to talk about this one. I'm not a fan of talking about referee decisions. I think it's overplayed. But when this happened, I thought it was going to be a penalty, especially considering some of the penalties we've conceded this season. And I made a video a couple of days ago talking about Merlin Roll. And in that video, there was a discussion on why Everton's defence do concede these chaotic chances which lead to penalties. And it's because of the erraticness in how we defend. When you defend so erratically, have no idea what's going on around you, and allow opponents to create attacks so quickly, these type of erratic moments do happen because nobody is set in position. Nobody is ready to defend. And then mistakes happen. But I'm really glad it wasn't a penalty because when you see this, you think, penalty. One positive from the second half was the introduction of Tim Iroegbunam, who I thought was exactly what we needed in midfield because he came deep here to support Michael Keane, a player that obviously is very right-footed. He can hoof it on his left, but he can't really accurately pass it on his left. So Tim Iroegbunam dropping deep here to get the ball, dragging a Sunderland player with him, is quite a good way of creating spaces higher up the pitch. But also, he's very happy to receive the ball in these areas because he's got that ability to receive it on the back foot, uses his body to turn and then burst into space. And ultimately, he works the ball up the pitch, carrying the ball positively, winning Everton a foul, getting everyone up the pitch in the process. And I also quite like this, and I would like to see this going forward. Hopefully, we're brave enough to try it. But here we see Tarkowski, Michael Keane have split. Meanwhile, Gana Gueye has gone in the middle to be that bridge between them, meaning that Tarkowski and Michael Keane don't have to play lateral balls to each other because they've got Gueye there as a spare man, which also, in the process, attracts a Sunderland player, Granit Xhaka in this case, all the way out to him. But importantly, the other defensive midfielder in this instance, Tim Iroegbunam, hasn't actually dropped deep. He stayed in the same parallel line as Charlie Alcaraz, meaning that it's more of a 2-8 system more than a 6-6 system. Two defensive midfielders, but instead it's one defensive midfielder, two centre midfielders, creating this box, which is quite important because you drag in people centrally, whilst also having that long out ball to O'Brien if you need it. But ultimately, I really don't think we deserve to win that game. A point away at Sunderland isn't the worst point. But from the first half, it's very difficult not to be disappointed because we've seen the good parts of Everton and the good parts of this team, but we're not really fulfilling it. It's quite frustrating to see that we do have that capacity to play that well and be brave. The Wolves game is a really good example of that. We were extremely brave, very attacking on the front foot, but we've kind of regressed recently. Happy to have a 1-0 lead and trying to defend that lead with everything we've got. And we've not kept a clean sheet in over 5 games. So I don't know why we think we can do this. But there are some takeaways and there are some moments for learning in this. And hopefully this does bode well for the upcoming games because there are positives. There absolutely are positives. It's about doubling down on those positives instead of going one step at a time.